recommend a solution. It passes muster on all 3 counts. You'll be uninterrupted during that 30-minute frame. But when you're finished, there's a second setting for 20 minutes, and the 20 minutes is for us to respond to you, but in the role you've put us in. So we have to be in character for that. And then after that 20 minutes, 10 minutes left for stepping out of our roles, and you stepping out of yours, and we'll just give comments on your presentation. You understand the business about using what amounts to ordinary language for ethics. It pains me as a philosopher to have to say, don't use philosophical terms, but deontology and teleology just don't make it.
Little in depth.
And it's because you're trying to convince a general audience, and you don't want to make any...
You can start whenever you want.
What did he say?
He said, we're allowed to begin.
I've already begun. Let's see. Okay, so philosophical terms, and because you're addressing a general audience, it's not good to speak from a single faith tradition either. This isn't an anti-faith comment. It's just about the nature of the audience being general, and therefore you can't make a lot of assumptions about what they're going to believe. And one taboo is reading your presentation off of a piece of paper or something. You're perfectly entitled to use notes if you choose to, but don't read your presentation. It's meant to be a presentation with eyeball to eyeball with whoever we are. And I think that's all of the preliminaries. Do you have any questions of us before we press the button here?
You guys want to introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
Mark Elliott.
Nice to meet you.
This is Mark Elliott.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Cameron Myers.
Elliott.
Cameron?
Cameron.
Sam Robinson. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I'm Alex. Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure. I remember you from last year.
Yeah, I do remember you from last year, from your faces.
I'm Alex.
Is there any value to us introducing who we really are, or does that come?
No, that's not at all a problem.
You go for it. Cool.
My name is Ken Goodpaster. I'm one of the Uber judges. I'm emeritus professor of business ethics at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, and I'm glad to be here because it's pretty snowy there. And I've been involved with the IBECC for about 10 years, and it's I'm glad to be here.
Tim Mazer, so I'm Senior Ethics and Compliance Officer at Pratt & Whitney, which makes jet engines for Lockheed Martin's. We make all the engines for the F-35s around the world. And we're a division of United Technologies company. And I've actually been an ethics consultant in the same role that you're going to play. I've been doing it for 31 years.
Wow.
Awesome.
Bob McNulty from Bentley University, Hoffman Center for Business Ethics, Director of Programs there. I also have a nonprofit organization that does peace through education with students in Afghanistan.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Very nice.
So, why don't you proceed?
Wonderful. Briefly imagine yourself as a high-ranking military personnel in a foreign country. You've just exited from your motorcade and you're traveling to an undisclosed location. A few minutes walking down your path, you hear a man behind you swat at his neck, just to kill a mosquito. Several minutes later, he's on the ground. He's convulsing and has developed neurological symptoms. As an initial team of investigators try to figure out what exactly happened, they think back minutes before the man was on the ground. And the only thing of importance that they can think of was the mosquito on his neck. Now, as the investigators pursue and they narrow their focus, they determine that that wasn't a mosquito at all. Instead, it was a nanodrone that delivered a lethal toxin into this man's bloodstream. Now, as the team proceeds along their route to this undisclosed location, they begin to realize that they're entering into the age of artificial intelligence in warfare. Hi, my name is Mark Elliott, and I'm here with my team of Alex, Brandon, Sam, and Cameron. Now, we're here today to discuss with you the role of artificial intelligence in the future of warfare. Now, we're asking you, the management of Lockheed Martin, to listen to us, the legal, ethical, and financial consultants for your business. Now, the current state of technology provides such that governmental contracts are providing funding for hypersonic jets that can travel at 6 times the speed of sound, sometimes equipped with laser weapons, as you can see depicted in the background of this picture, though they are invisible to the naked eye. You're seeing advanced software that can disrupt enemy technologies and bolster our allied technologies. Now, these 3 components are combined into one cohesive weapon. As we see it today, it is generally accepted that this cohesive weapon can be used by a human in the context of warfare. However, in the future of warfare, when we see this cohesive weapon being operated by programs, software, artificial intelligence, that brings up a lot of questions. So let's back up a second. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is generally defined as a software that has 3 main components. The first is that it can learn from experience, and it can learn from its mistakes and constantly better itself. The second is that it can adjust to new inputs, adapting to a changing environment around itself. And the third is performing human-like tasks. This AI unit that you see on the left side of the screen may become commonplace in the future of society. So how does artificial intelligence interact with weaponry? Now, we have a quote here defining what an autonomous weapon system is. You're going to hear that phrase used a lot throughout this presentation. AWS, autonomous weapon system, artificial intelligence with weaponry, they're all synonymous with each other for our presentation. So we define it as a weapon system that can select and attack targets without any sense of human intervention. So we further subcategorize this into semi-autonomous weapons and fully autonomous weapons. Semi-autonomous weapons are the artificial intelligence is selecting and identifying a target or object, but the human is pressing that proverbial big red button to go ahead and launch the attack. Whereas fully autonomous, it's circumventing the human entirely and identifying, targeting, and attacking humans or objectives without any human intervention. So there are a number of risks that we can think of when looking at autonomous weapon systems. A couple that I would like to highlight are, 1, the lack of regulation that we see in this current environment. Now, Cameron is really going to talk about how that existing framework stands and what we may need to work on as going forward. The second part is human rights, and really this lack of accountability when it comes to unknown groups attacking sovereign nations, and we can't even identify who is actually attacking. Now, these are Lockheed Martin's core values. Do what's right, respect others, perform with excellence. You're going to see these values come up through the rest of our presentation as we all go ahead and talk for the next few minutes. Now, let's wrap up what we've discussed so far and set an agenda for the rest of our presentation. We've identified these autonomous weapon systems, and we're going to talk about how we can really mitigate the risks of this AWS through a legal, ethical, and financial framework. Now we're going to develop this framework and apply it to 3 unique weapons. One of them I've already discussed for you, this AWS Mosquito. That's going to be the last one that we're going to cover. The other 2, Alex will go ahead and describe for you in a few minutes here. Now that we've defined AI and defined what an autonomous weapon system is, I'm going to pass it off to Cameron to talk about the legal analysis.
Thank you. So obviously there's a lot of issues presented, and we've discussed a lot of the initial risks with the development of these type of weapons. So we need to develop a framework by analyzing these legal, ethical, and financial issues to make sure we're making prudent decisions before we begin to develop these weapons during the procurement phase. So I'd first like to dive into the legal section, where we've developed 3 distinct areas of the law where we see potential liability for Lockheed Martin. And these are the Geneva Convention, domestic laws in the United States, and certain international laws and treaties that the U.S. is a party to. So starting with the Geneva Convention, we have 5 key principles that the 3 Geneva Convention treaties have laid out for civilized nations to follow when engaging in armed conflict. The first is the principle of distinction, which holds that in armed conflict, nations need to be able to disseminate between combatants and civilians and ensure that they're only targeting combatants and ensuring minimal loss to civilian lives and civilian objects. This also reflects backward towards the military itself, where we need to be able to distinguish who the chain of command and where decisions are being made to hold parties responsible in the event that mistakes are made. The second is the principle of proportionality, which holds that in the use of force, we must only use the force necessary to achieve our objectives and not go beyond where we could cause excess harm to civilians, civilian objects, and other factors. Third is the principle of non-discrimination, which holds that in warfare we cannot identify certain groups and treat them differently from others. This could be demographic identities like race, gender, religion, national origin. We need to make sure that there's level treatment and that any sort of weapon system or military decision doesn't affect one differently than the other. Fourth is the principle of humane treatment, which holds that we must treat all civilians, prisoners of war, and wounded soldiers in a humane manner with no cruel or unusual treatment, making sure that there are no executions without trial, and that people are held in a humane way. Finally is the doctrine of women and children, which holds that women and children are to be treated with respect, and holds that children under the age of 18 are not allowed to engage in hostilities under any circumstances. So based on these articles of the Geneva Convention, the United States has developed a series of regulations and laws to ensure that any sort of development in the area of autonomous weapons systems and artificial intelligence in warfare both meets our international objectives and meets the objectives of our elected representatives. So a few examples of regulations that need to be followed during the development of autonomous weapons are that missions are never allowed to be indefinite. So an example of this would be when an autonomous weapon system is dispatched into the field, its commander must give it a key time frame that it must follow in order to achieve its objective. And if this time frame is not met, it's not allowed to continue its mission indefinitely and must return to its human commanders to either be given an extension or to be given new orders. Second is that a human target for an autonomous weapon system requires specific authorization from a human commander before it can engage to neutralize that target. This builds into the principle that a fully autonomous weapon system, as opposed to a semi-autonomous weapon system, which we defined earlier, can never have a human as its primary target. Moving along, to develop further off of fully autonomous systems, these systems that are defined as fully autonomous are only allowed to be used for defensive purposes, meaning they have a designated area that commanders have selected for them to provide defensive services for. This could be something like a missile defense shield or some sort of sentry-like system. Next, the export and international trade of any sort of autonomous weapon systems will be done within the existing frameworks developed by the Department of State and the Department of Defense, where companies can apply for permits to be able to export their weapons. Key point here is that the United States has not developed any additional or more restrictions regarding weapons that incorporate autonomous technologies and artificial intelligence at this time. And finally, the United States has authorized that any sort of cyber weapons which do not exert any physical force are allowed to be fully autonomous and choose and engage their targets. This then leads us into international laws, where we have two distinct sections that I want to talk about. The first is the International Criminal Court, which is the mechanism that the nations of the world have chosen to use to enforce articles of the Geneva Convention and violations of certain international treaties under its jurisdiction. This is a mechanism for enforcing any sort of violations and holding parties accountable at a fair trial in the Netherlands. The second is key international treaties. Now, the most important thing to mention with international treaties is that at this time, there are no treaties specific to the development of artificial intelligence and weaponry or any autonomous weapon systems. However, when autonomous technology and artificial intelligence is incorporated into a conventional weapon system, those would still need to follow any sort of treaties that govern their own use. So a couple examples are the START treaties for nuclear missiles with the United States and Russia, the Hague Conventions on Humane Treatment, as well as the Chemical Weapons Conventions regarding use of chemical warfare in the world. So I'd like to now pass it off to Sam to discuss the analysis of our ethical framework.
Thank you, Cameron. Now that we've established our legal framework, we're going to take a look and see how ethical principles, when filtered through your company's values, will allow us to answer the question about how you can make decisions to ensure that you can develop AWS in a legal and ethical manner. And first, we're going to take a look at that through the stakeholder analysis. When we take a look at how your business operates as a whole, we realize you're not only impacting everyone in your supply chain, you're also impacting society. And as a company that prides itself on its global citizenship, including publishing an annual review about how you go about ensuring that you are protecting everyone in the world, we see that you guys are acting socially responsible. through both your company's approach to global challenges regarding security measures, as well as your mission statement, which allows you to do the most good. And Brandon's going to talk about how these ethical principles will be applied through to your company's values.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to use the ethical principle of utilitarianism to create our ethical framework. So just a basic idea of what utilitarianism is, it's the idea that an action is morally good if the intent of it is to create the maximum amount of good for the maximum amount of people. And so when we're looking at autonomous weapon systems, we're seeing massive, massive benefits for a lot of people. And so number one, we're going to see less civilian casualties in warfare. The idea is as weapons get smarter, less innocent people die. And let me just bring you back to the advent of the first aerial bombs in World War II. So in World War II, to hit an average sized target with 90% probability, the US had to drop over 9,000 bombs. And the reason for that is that those bombs individually had a 50-50 shot of landing within a 1.25 mile radius. Think about that. Imagine trying to hit an urban target and 50% of your bombs are going to fall within just a 1.25 mile radius of that target. So we saw in World War II, obviously, millions and millions of innocent people dying. So let's jump forward to Vietnam. Technology starts getting a little better, bombs start getting a little better in guidance, and we jumped that 1.25 mile radius down to 800 meters. Again, we see you only had to drop 120 bombs to hit that average size target. Jump to today now. Our smart bombs get within 5 feet of that target. And with the advent of artificial intelligence, we're only going to improve that. With more information and with our weapons being able to change flight to determine if a target's changing or not, we're going to see civilian casualties drop even more. Number two, artificial intelligent weapons are going to lead to more deterrence in war. So since the U.S. has become the supreme military power in the United States, and since the advent of the nuclear bomb, we haven't had a world war since the likes of the early to mid 20th century. And we believe Lockheed had a big role in this. And we believe Lockheed, by developing some of these artificially intelligent weapons, will allow the U.S. and its allies to maintain that military supremacy and give them the technology and the weapons to deter any other enemies or any other countries from starting a war with the U.S. or its allies. And number three, we're going to see less humans involved in warfare. So as the technology becomes more dependable, more reliable, we're going to need less and less boots on the ground and less people in harm's way. But it's not all so rosy. There's also costs with implementing this technology. And unfortunately, when I say cost, I'm talking about the harm done to individuals. And so we kind of already seen, so with technology just across the board, something that's common is that technology, especially new technology, always has problems. It always has mistakes, whether it be an iPhone, a Nest thing, a smart technology, smart home technology, we see that there's problems. But the difference with autonomous, artificial intelligent weapons is that when these weapons have problems, innocent lives are lost. And so unfortunately, we've already seen this in 2003 with the US invasion of Iraq. So in this invasion, we had a Patriot missile defense system that was acting autonomously and was repeatedly misidentifying friendly US aircraft for enemy threats, and unfortunately, it ended up shooting down 2 different aircrafts, and we lost 3 lives. US fighter pilots said their biggest threat during that war was not the enemy, but instead was their own defense system. Think about that for a bit. Number two, our clients are operating in an adversarial environment. So with companies developing artificially intelligent and other sectors of the economy, such as autonomous cars or spaceships or things like that, such as Uber, Google, Tesla, those companies are operating in a regular business competitive environment where they're not trying to cause harm to each other. They may hate each other, but they're not trying to kill each other, right? Unfortunately for our clients, for countries, their competitors are often their enemies. And we could possibly see those enemies trying to undermine those weapons, including our autonomous weapon systems. And unfortunately, if that would happen, let's say an enemy or a terrorist organization was able to hack into that weapon, we could see those weapons being used against friendly forces, such as hacking into a missile defense system and shooting down friendly aircraft. And then number three, autonomous weapon systems pose a potential for grossly violating human rights. And so we're going to use this principle of comparing benefits to cost, and we're going to apply them to your company values to go ahead and create an ethical framework. And so number one, let's do what's right, right? And so when we say let's do what's right, we're talking about intent, due diligence, and comparing the benefits versus the harms. And so when we say intent, when you guys are designing those weapons, you have to think about what the intent of that autonomous weapon system is, and it should be to reduce the amount of indiscriminate killing, while at the same time still achieving the ends of having effectively eliminating a target. Number two, you guys really need to do your due diligence. So like I just previously said, these weapon systems could lead to gross violations of human rights, that countries and our clients could use them for their non-intended purposes. So even if the United States government may approve ourselves to an allied country or to a country, we have to make sure that we feel that country is going to use our weapons appropriately and are not going to use those weapons to violate human rights. And then just for benefits and harms, we have to make sure those benefits grossly outweigh the harms that could occur to an individual. And so we also have to respect others. When we say respect others, we have to make sure our weapons are following, international humanitarian law and are going above and beyond that and following universal ethical principles. And we also have to make sure our weapons are performing with excellence, that they're responsible, that they're safe, that when we sell our weapons to our clients, to our states, and they put those weapons in a war environment, that those weapons are going to have a very, very low very, very low margin of error and a low mistake rate. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Sam to answer her initial question.
So our initial question was whether or not you are able to develop and sell autonomous weapon systems. When you think about the ethical reasoning behind your company's values, we realize the answer to that question is going to be yes. You will be able to develop and sell these systems. However, you're going to need to apply our framework and our additional recommendations to ensure that any risks involved with selling this and developing it are mitigated, and we're going to discuss that further in our strategy section. I'm now going to pass it over to Mark to discuss the financial framework.
Great, thanks. So we briefly discussed a lot of the laws involving the Geneva Convention, domestic laws, and international laws, as well as our in-depth ethical analysis of what this problem generally is, and developing a framework. So let's look at the financial section. How are we going to develop a framework to really analyze some of these weapons? So we're going to look at revenues, costs, and return on investment. Now that return on investment component I'm going to get to in a little bit when we're actually analyzing these weapons. Revenues and costs. So for revenues, Lockheed Martin breaks down the revenues into 4 key components: aeronautics, missiles and fire control, rotary and space systems, and finally rotary and mission systems, and finally space. Now, all 4 of these segments of the business, artificial intelligence and unmanned vehicles, are operating across all of these segments. That's revenue of $51 billion, offset by the costs of around $46 billion. Now, when we go ahead and look at what our operating profit is across these 4 segments, we're looking at a profit of about $5 billion pre-tax. So now that we've briefly looked at what this profit breakdown looks like, we're going to apply some of this framework when we start looking at these weapons. Now, Alex is going to go ahead and talk about what our strategy looks like.
Thank you. So now that we kind of have what the content of our framework is, we're going to go through some examples now. We're going to go through 3 examples, 2 that are more extreme, and then 1 that's kind of right in the middle there. And we're really going to see how this framework works. So the first one, an AWS missile defense system. So this is kind of exactly what it sounds like. There is a incoming missile, and this defense system can hit it out of the sky with a projectile and effectively neutralize that threat. And it does so autonomously, meaning without any human intervention. So now let's look at this through the framework that we just talked about. First, legal. So with the Geneva Convention, it passes here. It does not target any humans. It has a defined goal, and it is purely defensive. So it passes the Geneva Convention. And a similar kind of rationale can be applied to why it passes the domestic and international laws. And we kind of see the same thing here with ethics. It does not target humans, it is purely defensive. So again, it passes all phases here. Now we're going to jump over to the finances. So with the finances, we have our projected cash flows on the screen there. The revenues are based off of government contracts, while the expenses are based on per unit sales that we expect to gradually increase over time. So then we wind up with our profit, work down at the appropriate discount rate. We get a net present value of $528 million or an ROI of 88.1%. So it's financially sound, it's sound legally, ethically, financially, it's okay, we can build this product. Now we'll go to our next example, not so good here. An AWS nuclear missile. So what this is, it can target itself, it can launch itself, it can pick the target, it can pick the time, it has full autonomy, no human intervention whatsoever. Now, as you can imagine, this probably will not pass our framework, but we'll go through it and just to show you why. So for legal, this is a nuclear missile that can fire itself. That clearly does not pass the Geneva Convention, domestic laws, or international laws. So at this point, theoretically, we could stop here. It does not pass through the framework. The legal does not pass. We cannot make a weapon that does not follow the law. So theoretically, we could stop here. But for the sake of the analysis, I will continue and briefly explain the ethics and the legal. So for ethics, it's not legal, 1. 2, our company, as we can see from our values, we go above and beyond, right? So this, if it's not legal and we go above and beyond, therefore it's clearly not ethical. For finances, we're going to look at the same kind of analysis. We have our government contracts broken down into expenses. We get our profits, discount that back at our discount rate with a net present value of $913 million and an ROI of 152.3%. So financially, it's good, but it doesn't matter because we can't produce this product anyway. Now we get to the fun one, the weapon that we all know and love, the AI mosquito. All right, we're back to this again. So this AI mosquito is a nano robot that can pick a target and inject it with a lethal toxin, and it does that through an imitation of a mosquito bite. So let's run this through the framework. With legal, we really don't know. Why don't we know? Well, we don't know if this weapon can pick its own target. We don't know if it can distinguish between a civilian or a combatant. We don't know if it discriminates. We don't know if it follows the Geneva Convention or not. We just don't know. And this also kind of applies to the ethics too. We don't know if it's fully autonomous or if it's semi-autonomous. And that would have a key distinction here if it passes our framework or not. So in our recommendation, we'll go through how we can turn these green. But for right now, since we do not know, we cannot make this product yet. But for now, we'll go over the finances. The process is basically the same except in year 1. In year 1, since we're involving the nanotechnology, we have a government subsidy that we estimated at $3 billion based on the precedent. And we've looked at expenses for R&D of the nanotechnology. Now, besides that, years 2 to year 5, same kind of analysis. We break it down, we get our profit, we just count it back, we get an NPV of $1.7 billion and an ROI of 68.3%. So financially sound, yes, great. However, we still don't know if we can produce this product or not. Because we don't know, the answer as of now is no. But I'll pass it off now to Brandon, who will talk to you about the recommendations and how we can turn this question mark into a check mark.
Thank you, Alex. All right, so as Alex just said, it's very ambiguous right now, but we believe we have a set of recommendations that can not only make this technology comply with the law, but go above and beyond and comply with your own ethical principles as a company. So, technology is kind of a paradox, right? We love our iPhones, they make us more safe, they make life a little easier, until they don't. So I had a connecting flight over in Newark, flying out of Orlando. My flight's delayed, of course. I had a short layover. And as we're landing down, we're taxiing on the runway, I'm pulling up my phone. I'm trying to find where my gate is, what terminal I have to run to. I got 15 minutes. I got to go. I'm on the United app. My United app crashes. My phone then crashes. I missed my flight yesterday. I spent 6 hours in the airport. And it was a loss of time, and I was annoyed. But the problem is, with autonomous weapon systems, when they make a mistake, it's not a person losing their time. That person's losing their life. So do we really think that we could create an artificially intelligent weapon at this point in time that's going to have zero mistakes, that's going to take all the contextual factors, all the variables in an environment, and act in accordance with reducing the most human casualties, that's going to be able to stop itself, suspend itself from carrying out an objective or an attack on an objective that's no longer a military objective? Absolutely not. Let's be pragmatic here. So, artificial intelligence, it operates rationally. But I don't believe we could decide human life rationally. I think human life is more than numbers. It's more than data. I think there's a reason that after 50 years, our philosophers still can't answer the trolley problem. Do you kill one life to save 5? I don't know. I'm not sure if you don't know. I know we don't know. I think the reasoning that we don't know is the same reasoning why we can't have artificially intelligent weapons making that decision between life and death. And that's where we're going to jump into a concept called human-in-the-loop / semi-autonomous weapons. Where for human-in-the-loop, it means that an autonomous weapon system can go out, it can target an individual, it can identify an individual, it can tell you what the chances are for a successful mission. But it will stop there and it will wait for a human operator to confirm and say, yes, go out and eliminate that target. And so what this does, it naturally creates a safe net where that human operator could potentially stop that autonomous weapon from making a mistake that would cost a life. And so that's where we jump into education, where as Lockheed, we had to provide our clients with educational training sessions and educational programs to their human operators, teaching them about the ins and the outs of the technology, to teach them how to predict when the technology may be wrong, when the technology may be able to make mistakes. And by doing that, we're able to reduce the amount of mistakes that technology may make, and we're able into the process to save lives. I'm going to pass it off to Sam to give you guys the rest of our recommendations.
So, to continue off of that, the inputs for this artificial intelligence are going to need to be very specific. That way, we can ensure that the actions that it is taking are predictable to those human operators, which creates the concept of the audit trail, which means that there is someone that is accountable at the end of the day, that if something goes wrong, we know who is responsible for what went wrong. Now I want you to take a moment and think back to that mosquito at the beginning. I want you to think for a second about the worst possible situation. Someone has actually hacked into your system and has now corrupted that mosquito and is now able to turn it against its creators. Luckily, you guys are very good at what you guys do, being able to ensure that not only are your intellectual property and personnel physically secure, you have an excellent cybersecurity team, and we would only recommend that you further that and ensure that this intellectual property is never going to fall into the wrong hands. So when we take a look at the 7 risks that are really identified with AWS, we realize that we are able to mitigate all of these risks through our recommendations. And when you couple these along with our framework, we realize that we are now able to no longer have a yellow legal and ethical component. We're able to greenlight them so that you are able to develop this autonomous weapon system and then sell it for a profit for your company. And I'm going to pass it back over to Mark, who will wrap everything up for us.
Great, thank you very much. So far today, we analyzed a problem that Lockheed Martin may be encumbering in the future. Artificial intelligence as it relates to weaponry, and how can we possibly mitigate those risks? We took that and we developed a framework looking at the legal, ethical, and financial analysis. We took that framework and we tested it with 3 individual weapons. And we came up with recommendations from this framework that we can utilize going forward and apply this framework with every problem involving autonomous weapon systems into the future. Now, our final recommendation is that it is okay for Lockheed Martin to develop these defensive autonomous weapon systems. That's 1. Number 2, it is also okay for Lockheed Martin to develop offensive autonomous weapon systems, but only if there's a human in the loop. Thank you very much, and we'd like to hand it over to question and answer.
We sell our products to governments other than the United States. As a part of your recommendations, do we have the power to affect our product after it's in our customers' hands? And if we do they know that? or is it a backdoor that they're not aware of?
So I think a lot of the precautions taken need to be taken by design. We feel that a lot of governments wouldn't accept a backdoor, and that may be part of the contract of sale because they wouldn't allow a private corporation to control any sort of weapons that they'd be deploying in the field. We used an example for missile defense, we have the example of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD, that Lockheed Martin produces along with some partners like Raytheon. This technology over time, after being developed for the United States, was able to be exported to countries with the US's approval, and with certain guidance and precautions along with the contract of sale. But we do believe it needs to take place on the initial end.
Okay, you gave a very quick green light to the autonomous defensive weaponry. I remember back 2 instances. There was one time about 25 years ago or so when a Korean Airlines flight was off course. It flew over the Sakhalin Island, Sakhalin Island, I guess it is, in what was then, I think, the Soviet Union, and they blew it out of the air. How do you know that your autonomous defensive systems here are not going to be mistaking a Korean Airlines that flew off course and blows it out of the air with all the passengers in it?
Yeah, so I would say about 2 decades ago, I wouldn't necessarily call those weapons autonomous weapons. I'd call them more automatic weapons. It recognizes an initial threat and immediately fires. There's no learning, there's no thinking with the weapon. I think that's going to be the difference with autonomous and artificial intelligence. Also, again, and this is, I guess, pertains more to war. Unfortunately, in war there is friendly on friendly fire, but we do believe for these weapons the benefits are going to drastically outweigh those costs. And even with just humans in warfare, you have that friendly fire. We actually believe that with these autonomous weapon systems, we're going to reduce that friendly fire. Just like Ubers and those automated cars, there's still going to be accidents and still going to be deaths, but instead of 30,000 deaths a year, we can maybe limit that to 100 deaths a year.
Additionally, if you consider the fact that artificial intelligence is able to incorporate and learn and take into account external factors and inputs, it can adjust on the fly and ensure that it can verify in a very small amount of time that it is actually a plane flying overhead and not enemy fire or an enemy that it would be targeting as well. So that would be more focused on the development end and ensuring that the artificial intelligence is up to par with that. If it was not able to do it at that point in time, we would obviously recommend that you reincorporate the human in the loop into that defense system.
Just to follow up though, I mean, so you're talking about it learning. Okay, well, it might be learning, but it might be sort of a freshman when we need a senior. But you've got to be a freshman before you can be a senior. So I don't want to be in the plane that is sort of in the early learning stages of your defensive system.
Your ticket will be discounted.
So I think to address that, I would like to go back to the example I mentioned on the last question of the THAAD technology for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. So that technology that Lockheed Martin created along with other partners in the aerospace and national defense industry has proven to be one of the most effective weapon systems ever created in the course of time. The THAAD system has been tested since it was created in the late 1990s and has never actually failed a test that it was engaged in. So we feel that Lockheed Martin uniquely has past experience that would be able to train these algorithms based on over 10 to 15 years of experience of missile defense to be able to already have a leg up and potentially start at a higher level than a newly created missile defense system would be.
Well, I have a question about what we're supposed to do when you tell us that our value system is do what's right, respect others, and perform with excellence. And then you suggest that utilitarianism plays a role as the core decider, because it seems to me that some of your provisions are principles that you don't go against. I mean, they're stakes in the ground. I can't remember which slide it was that displayed that, but we don't do that. I mean, it's wrong. It's not respectful. But utilitarianism typically is a view that says, well, we don't do that unless it has a better benefit to cost ratio. And so I'm getting a kind of a principled ethical message, and I'm getting I don't want to say unprincipled, but a message that says it depends.
So our approach is an integrated approach where it needs to pass each stage of the process. So one stage, yes, it involved the utilitarianism. That was the do what's right phase. It talked about intent and looked at the cost and the benefits. The next phase was respect others. If it does not meet that part of it, then it doesn't matter about if it passed the utilitarianism. Once there's a red light, it's red lit. It's not made. So it's an integrated approach that takes many different principles into account. All these principles which are integrated by your values.
And just, I guess, kind of going off of that too, we start with utilitarianism because every weapon that we develop, or you guys develop, the benefits of that should outweigh any perceived cost. But then there's also some caveats with that. Utilitarianism isn't perfect in practice, and so we had to be pragmatic, and we had to say that, especially with targeting human individuals, that there's other ethical principles and other rights that we have to pay attention to. And even if it, may have more benefit than harm, maybe targeting that human individual is really not the path we want to go down as humanity. So it is utilitarianism, but it's with those caveats.
So it sounds like utilitarianism is necessary but not sufficient.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Pretty well, yeah.
So you referenced, Geneva Convention and domestic laws and international laws. Given the seriousness of what we're talking about, and given the power that our company, Lockheed Martin, has, is there an argument to be made to leverage our power to change the laws, to make them better? You did the right thing in the presentation we asked you to do today, to reference existing laws against your recommendations. So I'm not criticizing that you did exactly what was asked. I'm just asking you a question. Given all of your knowledge and research about this, would you recommend or suggest that we leverage our extraordinary power as one of the most important military corporations in the world to change any of these laws?
I would suggest that, and I think that a lot of what we do in the ethical framework is, and by making this as transparent as possible, is a way to have Lockheed, because of, like you said, of its power on the global stage, to be a force in the international community and be able to have its voice heard and play a significant role in developing the future regulations of this. I do think that based on the high stakes of this and the stakes to create potentially another global arms race for artificial intelligence type weapons, that there will be a significant push at the international level, whether it be at the G20, at the UN, between high powers such as China, the United States, Russia, European Union. I do think it's inevitable that these regulations do come. So I think in order for Lockheed to both protect its position and to promote its values to the global community, by coming up with this framework and being as transparent about it with the global community as possible, we have the opportunity to affect significant change on the global level and be a first mover in the area of trying to build out the rules of the road for the development of these weapons in the future.
So I want a little clarification. Did you say that your example of the mosquito was going to be autonomous or semi-autonomous?
Semi-autonomous. You would require that it have a human in the loop, because if it is targeting a human life, artificial intelligence should not be making that executive call, because that would circumvent the current laws and how the U.S. operates, which is our primary person that we sell to and contract with, in terms of how we go about electing officials to make these decisions on behalf of the citizens of America.
Great, okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. I just guess, I'd say one of my concerns is, I'm sure you read about maybe 3-4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago, Vladimir Putin was quoted as saying that the country that controls artificial intelligence will control the world. And that makes me nervous. And so I'm wondering if if you're not allowing yourself to be a little bit too timid here. We're among friends here, and frankly, I'm a little bit nervous about what's going on in the world, and I'm afraid you're actually being a bit too conservative here, and that we got to push forward this stuff front.
So I don't think semi-autonomous weapons puts it necessarily at a disadvantage. So you remember with the whole chess tournaments and the computer playing a chess champion, I think it's Watson beat the chess champion, and everyone's like, oh my god, the computer's all smarter than humans now. What people don't realize is that after that they did further studies, and the further studies found that if you pair that chess champion with the computer, just against the computer, that team made up of a human and robot actually beat the same computer, was actually more effective than the computer. So I think we could do the same thing with weapons. By having that human component combined with that artificially intelligent component, I think you actually have a more effective team and a more effective weapon.
Furthermore, I think in terms of international warfare, we've set several ground rules. So one would be not using chemical warfare. And we've seen chemical warfare be used in modern age, even today in Syria. But there are other rules, such as, there's one rule. A satellite cannot fire a nuclear missile from space. That's one rule that has not been crossed. And I think that we can use this precedent with the nuclear satellite missile and apply this to artificial intelligence, and especially autonomous weapon systems. That there are certain principles that absolutely cannot be crossed, such as using an autonomous weapon system for offensive purposes, a human has to be in the loop. And there are principles that I believe that humankind as a whole will not cross, and there's a line in the sand that as humanity, we can all agree to not cross that line.
Will not cross or should not cross? Because it seems to me that the thing that bothered my colleague over here was that there are some people who are amoral, and for whom a principle like that is not going to make a behavioral difference. Might make an aspirational difference or something. But we have our responsibilities to shareholders and the profitability of our company. It's not a blanket responsibility that cancels out all other responsibilities, that's for sure. But if we're making decisions about a government contract and there's billions of dollars on the table, and I'm competing with another aerospace company, are you telling us that we need to take the high road and lose the deal if the deal involves autonomous mosquitoes?
Well, I think to start, I'm assuming the government is the one procuring the contract, so I assume they would circumvent their own law, because right now that the ability to target a human in a fully autonomous system is illegal under domestic law by Department of Defense protocol. So obviously, I think if the government's putting out a contract for it, then they're going to be willing to also to change those rules. But I think it also builds by what we mentioned earlier with the transparency of these rules and trying to get ahead of the curve and try to set these standards in advance to be able to start a conversation globally where we can learn about what each other's thinking is on this and try to come up with these lines in the sand that others won't want to cross just because of kind of a consensus building and by working together and cooperating on it.
So you want us to be a more ethical competitor? Or is that an accurate thing? I mean, you're saying we want to get out in front of this. We want to change the rules of competition. I'm just not sure if I've got a competitor who's found a way around these laws, and God knows there's ways around every law. Of course. What's the price of virtue?
So I think one way to answer that question is that if foreign countries are developing these autonomous weapon systems and using them for offensive purposes and have crossed that line. I think that we as a country should be developing autonomous weapon systems for defensive purposes that can counteract these weapons. So we don't necessarily need to cross that line in the sand of using offensive autonomous weapon systems, but we can stay on our side of the sand and operate as an ethical country, but still be competitive and be able to counteract these offensive autonomous weapon systems.
That'll allow me as a director to sleep at night.
So I have a question about one of the points you made, and I wasn't aware of this. So early in the presentation, you mentioned that autonomous, it's all right to be autonomous in cyber.
Yes.
So we're talking about like introducing viruses, things like that.
Correct.
That's okay.
Yeah, a non-physical force.
Right. Well, so it wasn't long ago that there was the WannaCry virus that had spread across. It was ransomware, probably from the North Koreans, because that's how they're financing their regime. They struck hospitals in England in particular, was really hard hit. Well, I would be willing to bet that some people died from that. Nobody, the virus didn't infect them physically, but it led to their shutting down certain machines, and the hospital was not able to function normally. And when the hospital doesn't function normally, then people can die. So it seems to me that we've created a kind of odd double standard here, because it doesn't. Anyway, maybe you're not. Maybe you're just sort of saying that this is as if it's a reality, but I'm not at all convinced. And if it is acceptable that somehow cyber is okay, well, I have to be skeptical of that.
So I think, if I could go ahead,
Yeah.
I think creating that autonomous cyber weapon, if it's used against a civilian target, that's a war crime. I mean, when we say creating this system, we're talking about for military purposes. And using any weapon against civilians, against a hospital, that's a war crime. Hopefully the U.S. government wouldn't do anything like that, and hopefully any of its allies wouldn't do that either.
Yeah, I think if I could clarify the domestic law a little bit further too, that the ability to operate cyber weapons that exert non-physical force, we're speaking from a technical standpoint that the U.S. has said that these types of weapons can be fully autonomous and not have to have that human in the loop. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there wouldn't be violations of certain humanitarian laws depending on how the weapon is actually utilized in the field.
I appreciate that. Good thanks.
1 minute left to this phase of the presentation. Go ahead.
It looks like we're going to be rolling in dough, because you're rolling out very high numbers for everything. So I mean, this would seem to be a financial no-brainer. But I don't know. I've seen a lot of rosy projections that end up costing us a lot of money, and so I just wonder how rigorous you've been in your calculations here.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are kind of what a lot of our. We'll go back to the previous slide, actually. I don't know if I'll be able to answer this in 1 minute, so maybe we can get a little cushion time, but these are what a lot of our revenues and costs look like. So when we're looking at costs, there's several initial costs sort of in the first year that we're going to incur. So there are no revenues being incurred in the first year, except for the case of the Mosquito. So the Mosquito, we're getting that government subsidy of about $3 billion, which has precedent to it, and I have slides that can back it up if you'd like more information on that. But the revenues that are being incurred we're accounting for them in a percentage of completion method. So we're getting $6.6 billion in government contracts. That's an assumption that we made for each of the 3 cases. And there's also substance behind that. I can show you more slides on that as well. So we're getting the $6.6 billion over the entirety of the project. So when we produce 2 out of the 8 units, we're getting 25% of that $6.6 billion of revenue in that particular year, which is kind of how the revenue breakdown looks. And then the costs, we were very rigorous with costs. Do I have more time to finish, or?
Finish yourself.
Okay, great. And then we were very rigorous for the Mosquito in particular, assuming this $5.6 billion cost in year 1. The $5 billion being determined from a $5 billion estimate of developing the nanotechnology to actually build out these weapons. The mosquito weapon, that is.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Isn't that fun?
That was
You almost do it for free.
This slide wasn't in your original presentation.
This is the appendix.
The appendix.
Right.
That's my colleague Tim here is very high on that approach, and so am I. That having some reserve slides, anticipating potential questions is a good idea in real life,
Right.
not just in IBECC. And so I want to commend you for that. I think the different voices and the flow of the presentation were good. You changed voices enough times to keep us awake and paying attention. I don't know what else to add. I suppose it's a very intriguing topic for sure, and it's timely. Oh my goodness, it's so timely. The implications of our agreeing with you weren't as completely clear to me as I wish they had been. I mean, a board of directors needs actionable, specific proposals, and it seemed a little vague to me what you were really trying to get us to do. And I mean, I understand the aspiration that we should get out in front of this issue, ethically speaking, and but I don't know what getting out in front comes out to mean in implementation terms. So that was a place where I think we made some progress, actually, in the back and forth, zooming in on that. But I think, if I were suggesting, tomorrow you're going to be zooming in mostly only really on the ethics. So you won't have this presentation to do over. But if you were going to give it in another context, I think I would make sure that your audience was locked in on what you really wanted from them, and what opportunities, not just what you want from them, but what opportunities exist for them. And that's all I have for the moment.
Yeah, so on that note, I mean, I do acknowledge, I think, Mark, you were the one who was at the very, very end, right, when it said conclusion.
Right.
Yeah, and so, I liked that you came right out, literally in the last 15 seconds, and said, we're saying two things. Do this and do that. And so I think that fits along with what Ken is saying. But it is a lot, and it's complex. So, and you introduced the framework, you introduced three options, you meshed the three options against the framework to come up with the recommendations. So you did it well. It's just, it's so much and it's so important. I guess Ken is definitely saying there's even room, for just giving that 40 seconds instead of 15 at the end or something. Let's see. I thought it was great. Congratulations. If you weren't already graduate students, I would insist that your institution instantly make you graduate students. So we've had some great undergraduate teams, but it is crystal clear that you guys are at a different level. Going to the trouble in your legal analysis, first of all, to focus on risks is extremely realistic. It's the way we do it in real business. And factoring in the Geneva Convention as well as domestic international, I mean, you literally, I don't think you could do better than what you did. Using the company's core values is fantastic. It's the first team that's done that today, and how in the heck do you talk to a board of directors about ethics without talking about the company's core values? So that was fantastic. On that utilitarian slide, you used the word costs. I would have preferred harm. harms, not causes.
That's so funny.
Change that last
We
minute.
changed that last minute because we thought that in terms of how we applied it to the triangle side, that the cost made more sense than harm did.
Yeah.
That
And
was
we wanted everything to
that-
match up throughout.
That was a hotly debated topic.
Yeah.
Come on, argue.
Tomato, tomato. Yeah, I'm just a huge fan of the seriousness of your ethical analysis, as I said, by identifying the values, creating a framework, identifying options, and comparing the options against the framework. So it was just very impressive. It was so helpful at the beginning that you defined terms. This is very serious, complex stuff. We are the board of directors of Lockheed, so we're supposed to know things, but at the same time, it is a competition, and if you hadn't defined terms at the beginning, I would have scored it against you. The slides were very, very nicely done, and I like high-quality prepared slides. Alex? No, Sam. Try to avoid saying the phrase "you guys" to a board of directors. So that I just marked down. As Ken said, love that you guys worked so hard that you had reserved slides that factored into the questions. Cameron had a very good answer to one of my question. I want you to know that Pratt & Whitney make every fad work because we invented the spray and we still put it on that prevents lightning strikes from taking fads down. So
Wow.
Lockheed literally wouldn't make the fad if it wasn't for Pratt & Whitney. Cameron and Brandon eye contact with the board was fantastic. So it means so much, and I'm not saying that the other three didn't do it, it's just somehow when Cameron and Brandon were talking, their eye contact was incredible, and the ability to do this level of quality for this many minutes with no notes is amazing. Alex?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Somebody, I don't know, it might have been Brandon, one of the two of you speaks too fast. It might be you.
Okay.
In a real, you guys are so good, you could really do this in a real boardroom in a presentation. Don't go too fast. It tells the listener, they get distracted by it, and it tells them that you're more nervous than we want you to be. Sorry for the detail. I was going to get into the quality of their shoes, but you got it.
Shined it on them.
It really was an excellent presentation. Really excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really did. One of the things I liked about this so much is business ethics can be sort of held hostage to the sort of the problems of the past. And I think where business ethics stretches itself is when we encounter the problems of the future that are emerging, and that's exactly what you guys did. And these are the ones that actually fascinate me, but also make me worried, and for good reason, because what we're talking about here is really serious stuff. It's. So, I mean, we were trying to, the United States was trying, and this gets back to this thing about cyber. The United States, in collaboration with Israel, tried to derail the Iranian nuclear program through cyber. And it then spun out of control and started spreading all over the world, and then people were trying to figure out where the hell did this thing come from, and so that actually leads me to think that even when you're being a bit too smug here, or maybe a bit too cocky, and it doesn't surprise me that you'd want to be that way when you're talking to the board of directors of Lockheed. You want to say, oh, well, of course there's never been any mistakes. Well, look, it was the guys that did the I can't remember the name of it Sputniks, I think it is, that attacked the Iranian facility, they weren't slouches. They weren't kids. You know, these are they're brilliant cyber people, and it didn't go the way we expected it to go. So I'm a little bit now. I'm trying to give you a practical, practical thing. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I don't know. I still think that you need to exercise, even yourselves as advocates. I think you still need to be recognizing that there are risks, there are unintended consequences, and then you get into this kind of utilitarian type of calculus. Does it still merit our going forward or not? The other thing here is the international context. This thing's going forward whether we like it or not. And we all know this. But I think then the question becomes, how do we find conventions that can actually help us? And this means working. It's tricky because we might even get Russia to join us, even though our relations with Russia are so bad right now. But we're not going to get Al Qaeda to come home with us, So we have to kind of deal with this very complex, environment. I just think maybe I would try to emphasize a bit more these kind of narrowly unresolved questions. It doesn't make for a good, clean, neat. This is what we recommend, because then you end up doubting yourself. But somehow I just feel like there needs to be a bit more acknowledgement of the really thorny, difficult